Say it ain't so.
What? I didn't hear. Hello?
I'm hello.
What happened? You still
Did you
there?
did you yeah, I'm here. Did you do a thing?
Jesus. I touched a chord. Here are the following things that are no longer working for me. All right. The camera has been problematic all day. This is my third podcast recording of the day, by the way.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And the camera is just for some reason decided it doesn't really work anymore. So I have to you know, unplug it from the USB port, try a different USB port, hope that one works, go for an update again. And then I just found out by pressing like this on this part of the microphone, it nullifies my ability to use it apparently.
I live, laugh, love that for you. That's
Well, Jesse, I love that for you. So there.
well played.
So what did you think of game last night?
I had a really good time. I
Honest thoughts.
That's my honest thought. I had a really good time.
Okay. How do you think things are going?
I think they're going incredibly well. And it's really like exciting to see how the timer
Mm-hmm.
the time is it threat or time? I was telling someone about it today, like two
Yeah.
people that are nerds at work. I was telling them about this, really excited, like, and then this encounter happened and it was crazy. And like
The three T's. It's the threat, the timer, and treats.
yeah, the timer is pushing us to do things that aren't just cracking skulls, which makes it more interesting. Cause like I did the math and I'm like, I don't know that we could kill all 25 in 4 rounds. So we got to try
Yeah.
something else.
So the setup for the encounter is that the player characters came up to a farm and there are kobolds who were tossed out these fire beetles at this farmstead. And the fire beetles, the way I set it up was in 4 rounds, if any one of these fire beetles gets to the crops, it's burning it all down. And I said you either have to kill or somehow deter the fire beetles. And you would have done that easily with the treat that I put in the encounter that you ultimately didn't need because Patrick, in a weird form of like prophecy, was a druid that selected fire beetle.
Yeah, he picked 4 like underdark animals as his wild shapes. And
Yeah. And he was so excited to use it. And I love what you said because he changes into a slightly bigger giant fire beetle and then starts, moving around and gesticulating and trying to command the other fire beetles to turn around or at least stop. And then you say, this is that moment where the party burns the house down, which I thought was chef's kiss. It was like, because I had, that episode that we talked about it in which you had set up this encounter vampires in the Rifts game. They're all in that house. We come up on the house and then my character is like, why don't we just fucking burn it down? And then Patrick's character in that campaign just sets it on fire, burns the house down. The vampires are exposed to sunlight. They all die, right? And to recap the rest of that conversation is like I had told you that like tip of the hat, I don't know if I would have done that for the party. I would have only had half of the vampires die. I would have had the remaining half hiding in the basement. And in true Jesse fashion, he was like, aha, motherfucker. Here it is. How are
I hope.
half of these going to, so do you think I made the right move?
No, I think you definitely made the right move because you had another encounter that it just led into. So it's not like we didn't lose any tension. Now we're like, oh shit, this idiot knight that wouldn't listen to us is gonna get killed, and I guess that's bad for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the way I was trying to resolve it in my head on the spot was like Patrick came up with a way to do what I told you guys had to do in 4 rounds or less.
And he did it in the first round.
And he did it. He had the first initiative and did it in the first round. You know what I mean? So I was like, okay, I still need some sort of dramatic tension in this encounter. So I wanted to assure him this is happening no matter what, but I want you to make like an animal handling roll, I think it was, or whatever. And that'll determine like how this chaos ensues. Do you think I made the right decision there instead of like only activating half of them and you know what I mean? Like half of them don't listen, which was the other thing I could have done. I could have been like, all right, half of them listen, half of them don't.
Yeah, no, I think the chaos ensues, like putting a pause on the timer for a second to let other people try and come in and correct for the dice roll. I think that was 100% the right move. Did you hear me when I called out to Pat based on our conversation? I was like, Pat, angle for advantage on this. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um okay, so I wanted to check with you to make sure I did the right thing.
no, it was
Um
perfect.
I thought it was, you know,
And Pat was so apologetic for like
I
derailing the
know.
encounter. And,
I
like,
was like, stop apologizing. I'm a fan of the party. Like I'm not like the game taskmaster. You know what I mean? Like I'm not the like you ruined my encounter. I'm like, okay, that's maybe that's what I should have done is been like, well, I did say something to the effect of like, I love everything you're doing, but he was very apologetic. Which he didn't have to be because I fucking loved it. And then the funny thing about that is that he commands the rest of the beetles to go back in the holes, that they came out of. And the player characters, as you remember, are all trying to get into those hole, like the hills or whatever, the
yeah.
mounds, the underground tunnels where these things were tossed out of by these kobolds.
Mm-hmm.
So now two encounters are coming together at like breakneck speed. They're about to smash into each other.
You love to see it.
Yes, I do love to see it, especially since all my encounters, with the exception of ones that are done for story, are set at a difficulty hard or deadly on average. Like, so unless it's a specific encounter with something where it doesn't matter, all my encounters are always automatically set to hard or deadly in 5e because the way I look at it, why would you run anything on average? Why would you run anything easier than a hard or deadly? And I try to get to deadly, but I don't want to go too far over the experience budget and make it like utterly ridiculous. But like D&D is this game where it's like you get unlimited short rest, at least in the 2014 version. And you can long rest whenever you want. And the game is already like, in my opinion, tilted towards the players to make them fucking superheroes. So like, why not put every encounter by default at like as hard as it possibly could be?
Like, yeah, I'm a level 2 monk, and when this next encounter kicks off next game session, you said there's 10 kobolds in there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if there is a round where I kill 3 in melee. Like,
that's a good point. Okay, so to preface, I do put in, at least for now, I have put in a default like balancing factor that even though this is set to a really hard difficulty level, it's kobolds. So there's 10 of them. And kobolds don't have a lot of hit points.
yeah, with I mean, like, with the flurry of blows and bonus action strikes, like, I think we're near parity with the number of actions they can take, which makes it a fair fight.
Yeah. The last thing I want is to put in something at a deadly difficulty level that can one shot members of the party with ease.
Yeah.
The only time I want to one shot and drop a player character is if I roll a natural 20. I mean, that's the
or
whole
if it's
point.
Funny.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I was amazed at the fact that almost everybody took notes and that everybody kind of knew what was going on.
Yeah, we're all engaged. Like,
no, I mean, like, that's never happened to me before. This is a first for me that I ran a weekly game in which everybody in the group remembers what happened and is contributing information, especially when other people aren't mentioning it,
Well, we're doing it on a weekly cadence.
Yeah, but we've done a weekly cadence before for games of mine. And I still had to remind the party of like, this is what's happening. We have a scribe as one of our roles. And I purposely did not assign that because I was like, I don't want to do that. I'll remind you of what the key takeaways are here. I'll just say them out loud. Like, we ended last session. You guys were headed to the inn. You had the following leads. Go. Like I don't like. The more I think about it, the more I don't like the scribe idea of like forcing someone to take notes. If people want to take notes voluntarily, I'm all here for it. That's fine. But never in my long career of gaming have I had this engaged of a party.
I mean,
player
like,
characters.
it's a testament to your storytelling in this game, and like, and the
I think it's more than
opportunities we all have to be part of telling that story as well.
That's the other
we
part.
all have skin in the game of this shared narrative, so none of us wants to be the one that drops a plate.
Yeah, that's what I think it is. I think I am running a good game according to feedback. If I may pat myself on the back,
do it. You deserve it.
But I think the other part is that I have a really good group of players. And when
any in particular standing out as being really great?
I don't know, Jesse.
Oh, really? You didn't have to say that. Thank you.
No, everybody is firing on all cylinders for sure. But you're like, I'm biased towards you. Like I utilize you as a player character as if you're like a pocket GM. And I'm like, I don't know, Jesse will tell you about it. Like, what was in the woods, Jesse? And you're like what was the situation where I put you in? Where I was like,
oh, the necklace?
The necklace. So yeah. I have an NPC. We talked about this in the previous episode about like secrets and clues. And I have an NPC who's like a secret keeper, and he's magically bound by a beaded necklace. And when he was exposed, I said one of the beads on this necklace turns from yellow to purple because the secret of his identity as a secret keeper was exposed. And then I don't know why, but Patrick in our chat, in our Discord chat in between games was like, hey, is it possible another bead has changed color? And what does that mean? And I was like, I don't know, Jesse, what does that mean? And then I was like, Jesse, what does it mean when if a second bead were to change color? And then also, what happens if all the beads change color? And this is how awesome Jesse is. Jesse's like, a bead changes color every time one of his secrets is revealed, of any secret keeper. This is part of their religion. And then when all the beads turn to purple, when all secrets have been revealed, they basically become an equivalent of like an undead white.
Yeah, they're called collectors.
And they now like roam aimlessly looking to collect secrets.
Yeah, the hollow collectors, and they'll do anything to get them. That's the only thing that gives them the memory of life.
Right, like they're.
And then Pat said, "I just thought their head would fall off." I'm like, "It does. That's the first thing they collect."
I think to correct you, I think it was actually John who said the head part, but it could have been Patrick. I just want to give credits where credit's due. But I also want to illustrate how awesome that was, is that somebody else says, I thought their head just fell off. And Jesse's like, oh, it does. That's the first thing they collect. So now I have a creature that I can use later on in this 1-20 campaign of a ghost.
I think I even said statistically it's just a white. Like I even gave you a stat block for it.
Yes. You gave me this is the advantage of playing with Jesse, is he just created something for me to use later in the game, and it's already statted out and ready. And all I have to do is just, wait for enough time to pass for people reasonably forgotten about it, and then throw it in, and everyone's like, oh my God, it's a collector. And I'm like, yes, I am such a good GM.
The thing is though, I always run campaigns and that are pre-made. I almost all, except for the Rifts ones, those are both original Jesse. So I always do these pre-cons because I don't feel that I have it to do that. But the whole reason we have this fucking podcast together is because like you just bounce an idea off me and I'm like, I'm there, I got it.
Right.
I think it goes the other way. And here we are, the Jaunty Mantis.
All right. Well, welcome back to the Jaunty Mantis. And this is a podcast about tabletop role-playing games where creative nerds ask each other curious questions, and also curious nerds ask each other creative questions. Jesse, why do I keep forgetting the fucking tagline for our podcast? It's been over a year.
It has, but I mean, I don't think we ever nailed it down, and I don't know that either of us is in love with it. So, like, there we go.
Oh, I'm in love with it. I just can't pick which version I want to go steady with. My name is Maddie. I'm one of your hosts. My co-host is my best friend and a beautiful human being. His name is Jesse.
What's up, party people? Adventuring party.
That's right. And we've got plenty to talk about. This is season 4, episode 2. We finally got here. We've been decided to take questions from our gamer audience. And Jesse, today we have a question from Sam.
Yes,
and there's
Sam
going to be a few of these.
The hero of season 4. This is what will become a pattern. A Sam episode.
Yes.
Because Sam took the fucking case when we needed people to ask us questions.
Yeah. We're like, hey, dude, is there anything from the audience? And Sam was like, hold my beer. So our question, do you want to read the question specifically, or do we just want to summarize it as a topic?
Well, the question basically revolves around like the Jaunty Mantis. For those who don't know, in the original first edition Player's Handbook or Dungeon Master's Guide, there was an appendix at the back called Appendix N.
Right.
And Appendix N just listed, I'm actually looking at it right now, it just listed a whole bunch of the sources of fiction that were influencing Gygax and I think Arneson at that time, but mostly Gary.
Right.
I think is the primary authorial voice in that text. Not saying he's the mad genius of all ideas, but yeah. So I'm like looking through this and I'm like, I know Paul Anderson because I think Jem got me 3 hearts and 3 lions for my birthday.
Okay.
One year. And then I'm just going through and like, I know the name Edgar Rice Burroughs, but I don't think I've ever read any of it. More names I don't know. The Carnelian Cube by August Derleth I've heard of. Lord Dunsany I've heard of from Exalted. He was like, they say read Lord Dunsany to get a feeling of where Exalted came from. Robert E. Howard's Conan series is on there. Farford and the Grey Mouser, H.P. Lovecraft. And this is really a fascinating read. And I'm sorry to go off on this because this isn't necessarily our question, but this is a fascinating read because like Tolkien is one line. And I think so many people make assumptions about Dungeons and Dragons and Tolkien that I don't think are actually correct, because I can't think of any edition of D&D I've played that really does a good job of mirroring Tolkien. But like Dying Earth, Jack Vance, like that's where Vancian magic comes from. Like,
yeah, and I'm definitely guilty of that. Like, I make a direct parallel between Tolkien and Dungeons and Dragons, incorrectly as it may be. So I'm more than willing to cop to that. I've always made a direct comparison. So this is news to me that like all these other sources, you know what I mean? I hadn't even heard of Vancian magic until like, I think 4 years ago when you told me, about it. So, and its relationship to the game, the world's most popular role-playing game.
So Sam's question
yeah,
was, what is the Jaunty Mantis' Appendix N? What are the other properties that get you get your ideas flowing?
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned, I'll give a freebie right now. You mentioned Exalted, and in Exalted, I believe they do this as well, of, inspirations or things you can read or watch to get into like kind of the mindset of what Exalted is. And if I'm not mistaken, like that 2001 movie Brotherhood of the Wolf is on there on
Yeah.
that list.
Le Pac de Loup.
Right, right, right. So I mean, I think like this is a common theme, and it's a good tool too. Like, but my question before we get going on the list that just occurred to me, have you ever done something similar for like setting up like a campaign setting that you want to run for your, or a game you want to run for your players? Have you ever said, here's an appendix or list of, inspirational materials that may like give you an idea of what this world is like?
Well, I want to now, but no.
Yeah.
And now that you mentioned that as an idea, I'm like, oh yeah, make a playlist for your character. Here's an appendix of reading it.
Yeah.
No, I have never done that because I've sort of held the cynical view that I'm on the record because of the format for talking
Hmm.
about that. I don't expect the players to even read the rules of the game we're playing, uh,
Guilty
let
as
alone all these
charged.
auxiliary materials that influenced, my ideas of story. And I don't think the way that my creative process works, I'm necessarily in the moment of writing something or coming up with a storyline thinking directly about the inspiration. Like it's all
Hmm.
in there in the background muddling together like the world's worst instant pot.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
when the pressure release comes off and you unscrew the lid, something comes out, and it was influenced by those things. But I'm almost never doing a one for one. I
Yeah.
want to keep a notebook. This is my plan as I was thinking about how to prep for this episode. I want to start keeping a notebook by like on the coffee table, that when I'm watching TV with Carrie, if I see a character I think is cool, I can just write down their name and a couple
Hmm.
descriptive traits so I can use them for NPCs according to
Yes.
the lazy dungeon master
Yeah. I'm a
method.
big fan of this idea because I actually do something similar. I will make shorthand notes like in an app on my phone. Because I don't know if other nerds do this. You probably do, given what I've seen on the internet. But I think those of us who like to tell stories in whatever form that is, whether you're a writer or a creator, whether you're in the movie industry, or whether you're just a nerd at a table running a fucking awesome role playing game for your friends, I think a lot of us look at modern stories and say, well, I would have done the following things different, you know?
No, you don't say.
I think we all do that to a certain extent. And I got in the habit of doing this pretty early on. And then kind of it really came into its own, I think around the third Star Wars prequel, where I started like really making notes of like what I would have done differently in this series. And then sometimes I will go into that list and pull ideas for games because although I want to clearly state plagiarism is not cool at all, you should definitely try to write and create your own stories normally. However, I think the caveat is at the gaming table, you should fucking steal whatever you can and
Yeah,
repurpose it.
the Greeks wrote all the scripts.
Yeah. So
It's
it's like,
fine.
I think if you're going to write a novel or make a movie or a show or whatever, you should try to be as original as you can and not steal from other people. I think you should steal when you're at the gaming table. I think you should steal as often as you can and just change it just enough so that it fits what you're trying to do in your game. And so I have done that. I have made lists of like, oh, I was watching this, quirky, I think Canadian show called The Imperfects with my fiance. It's ridiculous. It's funny. Uh, is it a super great show? No, but we really enjoyed it. And I was like, I would use this character in a role playing game at this moment in the show. And I like just a quick shorthand. And I do it afterwards. I don't do it while we're watching it. But I'll remember those things. So what you just mentioned, uh, really stood out to me in that way.
Yep. I
Okay.
want to be more deliberate about like the inspirations for storytelling because my normal process with this, and it's going to make this episode fun but hard, is that like I just get excited about something and then chase it down for like 3 or 4 days and then drop it, but the idea is still back there
Yeah. Yeah.
percolating. Like and we just happened to line up with the new season of the One Ring and starting or Rings of Power and
Oh
starting a One
yeah.
Ring campaign. So it's perfect because I'm like
Oh
watching this,
yeah.
getting ideas for my character, and then getting to apply them instead of having to wait for the gap to run the campaign, et cetera, et cetera.
We'll have to do a bonus episode about Rings of Power because I absolutely love this show.
Yeah, me
And
too.
I can see why other people don't. That's very obvious to me, but like it really appeals to me. Every episode is like really doing it for me. I know that hasn't been the case for a lot of people, but like I'm super into it. So we should definitely do a bonus episode about that at some point. All right,
Yes.
you ready to get started?
Sure. I was born ready.
Okay. So why don't you go first? What is it doesn't have to be the top thing. These aren't in any kind of order. What's a thing you like that would be in the appendix for the Jesse role playing game?
I'm gonna go with the Battlestar Galactica reboot.
Fuck yes.
Yes. Um, because I like how it has a large ensemble cast. I like how it does sort of myth making while also like it's mythical and gritty at the same time, which are two
Yes.
great tastes that taste great together.
Yes.
A thing I aim for in my storytelling. I don't know if I always make it there, but I
Interesting.
aim for that when I'm running games. Um, Usually I rely on the mechanics for grit and then story for myth.
Yeah.
Uh, and it also just like one of the things I remember the episode, like, okay, sorry, spoilers for a show that's been out for I don't want to think about how many years now. But that whole like I think third season where they're on New Caprica and the
hmm
Cylons are like running them, and the
hmm
show makes you sympathetic towards a suicide bomber in the
hmm
context of that is a thing that is regularly happening to American soldiers
Right.
in Afghanistan and Iraq. I'm like,
hmm
God damn, that is like just the power of what a story can do. Do I think I can do that in an RPG? No. But as like a bar to aim for, like, yeah, so fucking cool.
I mean, do you have to do it to that level, or can you achieve your goal by evoking the same kind of feeling, the same flavor, the same inspiration, as it were?
Yeah, no, I think you definitely can
Yeah.
get that same sort of flavor.
Yeah.
You know
Uh,
how literal I get about shit like this.
yes,
So
for sure. Yeah. The Battlestar Galactica series that you're mentioning almost made it to this list. And the reason why it didn't is because I wanted stuff on my list to be stuff that like I regularly just come back to over and over and over again throughout my life. But that show could have very easily have been on this list. Like that show it creates tension in a really great way. It uses these elements of like who's a Cylon, who's not a Cylon, and it just like mixes them into the stories and creates this like anticipation and dread for what could happen at any moment. And there's not many shows or movies these days that like I would sit there and go, I have no idea what's about to happen. And that is a show that for the majority of it, I was going like, this could go anywhere. I have no idea what's going to happen. I am fucking in on this story that they're telling.
and they didn't even like you very really felt like any character could kind of die at any moment, and they never really brutally murdered characters
Right, right.
like to make you feel that. So yeah, just
That's a great point, right? Because then I guess the juxtaposition for that would be like Game of Thrones, where it was like it also kind of gave you that evocative feeling, but it was because they did periodically just kill off a character here and there.
yeah, I'd say Battlestar felt as equally precarious to the characters you love as Game of
Yes.
Thrones without ever really taking away any of the characters you love.
Right, right. Yeah.
And just as a last note about this, if you know someone that has it or can find it out there, if you want to feel what a gaming experience with some of these ideas are like, the Battlestar Galactica board game, where like one or two people are secretly Cylons, uh, like it is like that is what a play experience can feel like with that sort of dramatic tension. I'm going to put that as as an appendix in A.
Yeah.
board game that goes with
Yeah,
the show.
mark this down for a whole episode unto its own, like tricks, story tricks involving your player characters. Like, have you ever had a player character been an imposter? You know what I mean? Like, one of my favorite all-time games I've played in was with one of my original groups when I was like a teenager, and my character had like fallen down a pit or whatever and stumbled upon this like black pool of ooze, and I had ended up dying next to the pool, and then like an evil version of me came out of the pool, and the GM had pulled me aside for all of this, and was like, "Yeah, sorry your character died. This is a monster in the game, and you can play this monster as your character, except when it comes down to fight, and then I'm going to take them back from you. And when they kill it, like you're done. Like your character is just done." And it was so much fun to try not to give myself away. Like he had given me notes to work with as far as like this is what your motivation is now, and I just ate it up. I loved it.
Do you
So
remember when I did that when we were running the Bane Warrens?
yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the oh God, the Bane Warrens. Monty
Like where there
Cook.
was the adventuring party of monsters. One of them was a phasm that could detect thoughts or read thoughts and
Yep.
make itself look like anything. So it's just like, yeah, you got yanked, pulled the guy in the room. You're now a phasm pretending to be your character.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, have fun.
Yeah. I look forward to our episode about that for sure. I'll go next. This one is very recent to me, and that's why I know I said that everything on my list is stuff that I come back to over time. This is a series that I just watched, and I already know that it's going to be something I come back to over the course of the rest of my life, like everything else on this list. So I wanted to start with it, and that's Netflix show, an animated series called The Dragon Prince. That's the first three
Mm,
seasons, and then after that is The Mystery of Erebos, which is the rest of it. And the
great
reason
choice.
why, what yes, the reason why I put this show on the list is because it is. I don't mean this. I don't mean to denigrate it. This isn't a put down, but it's really not doing anything really new or innovative in like as far as a fantasy story is telling. It's in the Avatar, the Last Airbender tradition. It is modeling a lot of its stuff off of anime and what we like about anime. This is American anime. This is like all the things we love emulated into American style storytelling.
Hmm.
And I found the series to be like very predictable, but not in a bad way, in a cozy way. And then in the moments that it did surprise me, it was like a genuinely nice feeling when I had predicted one way and it had gone the other.
Yeah,
What this show is doing is it's doing everything that it is doing exceptionally well. And it is not doing anything that is insulting to your intelligence as an audience. And it is giving every one of its characters so much time to just grow into who they are over the course of the series. And I don't want to go into specifics because I don't want to spoil it because it is relatively new. But I was just blown away at like how like just well done the series is, how interesting the story is, even though they're not really doing anything that I have never seen before. And the
I think
characters are so well thought out. Go ahead.
one of the things I think you can take to immediately take that as a story inspiration for role playing, whether as a PC or as an NPC, because you saying that reminded me, I talked about the success of the small town of Vogler. The PCs really cared in my Dragonlance game
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
about these people in this town. And I realized now I was doing the thing that the Dragon Prince does, and it's that everyone is sincere.
Right.
They are
Yes.
not, they are sincere in a way that is honest. It is not naive. Even
Right.
the bad guys are
Mm-hmm.
sincere, like
Yes.
in what they're trying to do. Like, and it's just like when you have a world where you have a primary cast of protagonists who are sincere, engaged, and care about the world and each other, it's going to be pretty entertaining to follow. It's going to be a great
Right.
story because it's, like you said, cozy.
Yeah. And they have they really dial in very well on these character archetypes. Like they have a character in it who especially in the first couple of seasons, but definitely also in the later seasons, he's very childlike, very innocent, and he has a sense of like cheerfulness and wonder about like, like he'll like playfully interact with an animal, or he'll be amazed at something that's happening, and it's done in such a genuine way that like I'm not rolling my eyes at it. I'm like, this character is reminding us all who are watching this show, and then the characters that are experiencing the story, that it's okay to just be like in wonder of the world. It's okay to like uh like hold on to some of that innocence, to remind us old people, the older people, that like you didn't have to become callous. You could have, you can still like tap into the part of you when you were young and like had wonder for the world. And I found that to be incredibly endearing
And there's
as
in
someone
some
who's
cases in
watching
that
it.
show, right? You can come back.
Right. Yes. Yes. I think and the last thing I want to say about it too is like the magic in this show impressed the hell out of me, because the progenitors of the people in this world, I'm trying to be general as possible because I don't want to spoil it. It's like as you get further in the seasons, you realize that the style, the architecture, the spells, the magic has all been developed around the original creatures or beings of this world, and it all starts to come together of like why there's a magic spell that turns your arms into wings. Like when that first happens, you're like, oh, that's a really cool thing. Then as you get into later seasons, you're like, oh, now I understand why that spell exists. So it's like they did a really good job of just like leaving no stone unturned. It's so purposeful. And I think as a GM moving forward, that gives me a lot of inspiration to be like, everything should be purposeful, and some things can have no purpose at the same time, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, totally.
All right. So what's your next thing? What's another thing you love?
So I'm gonna go to a music route, and we've talked a little bit about music. Like I know you are pretty rigorous about creating playlists for
Oh yeah.
campaigns while you're kicking around ideas, and then I always love, like, I wish if you're not shy about it, you should link the Shadowrun playlist and
Okay.
the Spelljammer playlist in the show notes,
Sure.
like because they're just a blast to listen to. When it comes to music, it's a bit of a long-winded pitch. I like lyrics more than anything else. Blame my poetry degree,
Right. I was gonna say it
blame
makes
my
sense.
relationship with the English language. Like I can nod my head appreciatively to a good beat, but more than anything, clever lyrics are what gets me. And so part of my showmanship style comes from Tom Waits,
Mm,
the music of Tom Waits,
that makes
the
sense.
later, in particular, music of Tom Waits, because there is a thing I do. I think you've seen me do it when I'm storytelling, where I take on the attitude of a carnival sideshow barker, pulling back the curtain of words
Uh-huh.
to show
Uh-huh.
what this horrible, I mean, like, it's my ability to extemporaneously go off and spout cosmic horror has nothing to do with how much Lovecraft I've read. It
Mhm.
has to do with how much Tom Waits I've listened to.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I just think as like strange stories of odd characters, humanizing what people would by default think of as inhuman. Like I was searching for something on Spotify today, and a Tom Waits song called Tabletop Joe
Hmm.
came up. Have you heard Tabletop Joe by Tom
No.
Waits? It's a song about a guy who has like no body, he's just a head, and he lives on the table and he works in a freak show, and everyone calls him Tabletop Joe. Pretty similar
Uh-huh.
to the song Eyeball Kid, has kind of a sort of
Okay.
a same thing, you
Okay.
know. So yeah, I'm gonna say the music of Tom Waits. If you want to use it for just background music, I reckon that he did a musical um, about for with William S. Burroughs that was played in Germany. And
Brilliant.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. How about you?
I've got I'm gonna go with another cartoon. This is one that I like. I watch this cartoon in its entirety every 2 or 3 years, easy. It's
Thundercats.
it's another animated show. It's from the 90s primarily, and it's called Gargoyles. And this show was a definitely uh um a formative force in my creativity in general. This is like a Disney show. The people that created it were inspired by the old Disney show called Gummy Bears. I don't know if you remember that. And they wanted to make a more like cutesy Gummy Bear style show, but because of like what was happening at the time in
It was the
entertainment,
90s.
and it was the 90s and the expectations of what they were working with, they ended up having to change what they were doing to what ended up becoming Gargoyles, which is like, it works a lot with Shakespeare and history, and magic and mythology. And the idea is that, there are these magical creatures called gargoyles that exist pretty much only at night, because during the day sunlight turns their skin to stone, and they have this whole culture around family and loyalty and protection, because during the day they stand and protect like a castle or whatever the case may be. And the way that this show was able to incorporate these concepts, because back then they weren't doing like the kind of storytelling that we're doing today, where it's like you can binge an entire show. It was like back then, if you missed an episode, hopefully you could get it during reruns on accident. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like they would do the main season of the show, and then like during the summer of any, you'd be like, okay, well, I hope it's in syndication and I can see the episode I missed.
If
And
I'm
this
remembering correctly, they did not do Monster of the Week on that one. It was like a continuous plot line a lot of the time.
They had, okay, so it was mostly Monster of the Week, but they
Okay.
did have continuous plot lines that were easy enough to follow if you were watching every episode in order.
And there were fairly like adult themes in that one,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, because and it's a very diverse set of characters. Like the one of the main characters, her name is Elisa Maza, and she becomes like the first friend of the gargoyles in the modern era, and she begins to grow a relationship with the leader of the gargoyles. His name is Goliath, and there begins to come to this point where there's almost this romantic aspect between the two of them, and it does start to get fleshed out as the show progresses. And it's a very interesting concept to roll with in a cartoon that was meant for kids.
Yeah.
It had these serious adult elements.
Does Keith David voice Goliath?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he definitely does. And he
I
fucking kills it.
sorry for the audience. I know Maddie loves this show. Like this is a thing, and I'm not as deeply immersed, but also a fan.
Yeah, and I'm trying so hard not to spoil anything, because although this is a show from the 90s, if you have Disney Plus, go check it out. I keep in mind it is an old cartoon, but it is worth investigating and sticking around for. So I can't recommend Gargoyles enough, and I always go back to it because the music, the storytelling, it's got almost every other voice actor from Star Trek The Next Generation. Almost every actor from that show is a voice actor in the show. Like Jonathan Frakes is the villain, and Marita Sirtis is another villain in the show. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think at one point they got all of them in, if I'm not mistaken, voice acting at least one character, one cameo in the show. If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong about that, but it. And the main villain, Xanatos, it like, you want a masterclass on how to do a villain who suffers failure. Perfect example. Like, this is a guy who, like, they stop him they disrupt his plans and stop him from getting the MacGuffin or doing the thing. And then by the end of the episode, he's convinced you, the audience, that this was all going according to plan. Like, this all played out exactly what he was hoping for, and he sells it. So yeah, gargoyles.
Okay.
All right. What about you? What's another thing you love?
Gosh, I'm struggling here. You want to take a second pick while I think?
I will. I've got a whole fucking list of it. So you mentioned music, and Jesse was right. I do love to make playlists in order to find inspiration. If I'm thinking of a particular scene that I want to do in a role-playing game that I have coming up, I will create a short playlist for it. And then if I'm like washing the dishes or going on a walk or I'm at the grocery store, I will just listen to this playlist over and over and over again and let my mind kind of like take place in that scene that I want to run for my player characters. But there's always I love movie soundtracks, and there's always a couple that like I love the energy, and I love the songs, and I love like it's for some of them it's that time and place for me, and it evokes this like great feeling of adventure and excitement. And so I have the Willow movie soundtrack on there. Say what you want about Willow as far as whether or not it's a good movie or not.
Ba, 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 ba.
Yeah. But the soundtrack to that movie is fucking incredible. If you love the idea of doing like a fantasy adventure like fun theme for your game, like put on the Willow movie soundtrack. It's on Spotify finally, if I'm not mistaken, and it is just a delightful listen if you're into that sort of thing.
I went on a deep dive today for the Masters of the Universe, the motion picture soundtrack, but it was not on Spotify.
We don't say goodbye, Jesse. We say good journey.
Good journey.
Did you know I put that in a sign off for when I worked at my Corpo Matty job that I'm not at anymore, and when a really higher up person left our division and went on to another chapter of their life with the company, and you have to write on their like wall or whatever like their sentiments. And keep in mind, I really like this person, and I meant this genuinely. But I put that into, I said, hey, just so you know, we don't say goodbye, we say good journey. And I was like, nailed it.
Oh, that's so great. So great.
I'm such a nerd. I can't help it.
Yeah, it's great sliding the nerd shit into everyday life and people don't know, and you can be like, hee hee hee.
Yeah. I just inserted a joke that maybe 5 people will remember from a failed movie franchise.
All right, here's my next one. I thought about it. I was going to say, I keep trying to confine it to like fantasy role playing, and that's not the only kind of role playing I've done and do.
Tell.
So I was going to say the pretty obvious one, but I don't know anybody that Anne Rice, but I'm going to skip right past Anne Rice and say Poppy Z. Bright.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I
don't know what this
Poppy
is.
Z. Bright.
What? Explain it.
Poppy Z. Bright was the horror ingenue of the mid 90s, and wrote some really great vampire and ghost novels like Drawing Blood, and that influences the more horror, gothic, romantic style elements I sometimes like to bring into games, like this vampire campaign that I keep kicking around in my head. And I will do it someday. That is not necessarily influenced. Well, no, the Battlestar stuff's on there, but that's not influenced by the soundtrack to Willow. That's influenced by like Poppy Z. Bright.
Gotcha.
So it's just compelling, interesting characters, very real stakes. Yeah, I just really would highly recommend reading it.
All right, fantastic. I mean, speaking of books, another one from my list, and Jesse is very familiar with these books, is the Prism Pentad book series.
Oh, the Dark Sun?
Yes. This series, although with all due respect to Troy Denning as a writer, this is not like cerebral level fiction. These are not this will not take its place amongst the great classics of literature of our times. But what it is a very well written, just fucking fantasy sword and sorcery adventure in a desert world of despair and dehydration. And like,
Yes.
and the fact that this story makes it to book 5, like, I'm not saying that all of the books are fucking fantastic, but most of them are. And if you know what you're getting into, if you know this is pulp, style fantasy, don't take it too seriously. These are actually really great reads. And I got into them because I found that Dark Sun box set in like a Barnes and Nobles or whatever way back in the day. And I was like, wait a minute, there's fucking novels for this as well. And like, I have read these books so much that their covers have come off. I absolutely love them. So
It's
yeah, go ahead.
it's just really a fascinating thing because like those books came out at the same moment as the box set.
Yeah.
So instead of like doing the books and then the box set to drive interest, they're just like TSR was just like, well, load the content shotgun and
Yeah.
fire it at a B Dalton and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And then like immediately the books came out at the same time as the campaign setting. The timeline of the books moves past the timeline of the box set campaign setting and invalidates it
Yes.
by killing the
Yes.
Dragon of Tyr. Sorry, spoilers for the Prism Pentad. They've
Right.
been out since the 90s.
Right. Right.
And then the revised Dark Sun box set had to update the timeline to all the heroic epic crap, that
Mm-hmm.
world changing crap, at least for the tier region of the tablelands that had happened. And it's just such an interesting phenomenon of that time and place.
Yeah, it is. And I'm a huge fan of those books. But I never read anything else that Troy Denning ever wrote. I don't know if he ever did. And I never read any other Dark Sun novels. I know there's at least a couple more
They
that are
released
out
one
there.
with the 4E Dark Sun.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah,
Do
more Dark
you
Sun out there.
do you have another thing you love?
Another thing I love that influences, yes. Um, I'm gonna say the Fall of Civilizations podcast.
Interesting. Okay.
As someone that plays games that frequently have ruins from exhausted civilizations, and from someone who's interested in the idea of historical RPGs, it's just such a great like cultural source about how civilizations rise and fall, what they leave behind, and it gives you samples of music and art from cultures that aren't your own, and just it's really stuff that gets the imagination like flowing as you're thinking about like designing some ancient ruin that's fallen under the ground. The PCs are going through like, what was it for? Why was it here for? Like it's just great to have that knowledge.
Yeah, I don't know why I never considered this before. That's a great idea. There's lots of history podcasts out there. There seems to be a fair number of history podcasts about shitty people in history. And
Yes.
it's like it never occurred to me to use history podcasts as like, with the exception of one, actually. What was that one podcast where one guy knows about history and he tells another guy
Oh,
like
the
a weird,
dollop.
the dollop. Okay. The fucking dollop is an amazing podcast. At least when I haven't listened to it in a long time. I don't even know if they're still doing it, but for a while that was like a podcast I couldn't wait to listen to every week.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking funny as shit. It's two comedians. One's a history buff. The other's really not at all, and he tells the other guy a story about history, and it's the first time the other guy's hearing it, and their interaction around it is fucking just comedy gold.
And we played in a mini campaign based on Matt's interpretation of
Yes.
the Yukon, I think, Gold Rush episode
Yes.
of the dollop he had listened to.
Yes. So that is the one exception, like, of listening to a history podcast and then taking the events of what happened. And I highly recommend the dollop for this, because these are weird moments from history that they've found and decided to talk about. And that's what makes them perfect. If you need like a backdrop for your setting, if you need something going on behind the scenes, or even if you're just looking for the direct events that are supposed to play out in your story, like look no further than our own history on the planet Earth here.
Yeah, Fall of Civilizations doesn't really focus on like of the bad guys. It just kind of tells the broad story of a civilization's rise, like their golden age, their decline, and then their fall. And then like it usually ends like the ending of these episodes are so harrowing because by this point you really feel like you've started to get to know who these people were. Like you've heard some of their art and poetry and what their economy was like and all
Mm-hmm.
this other stuff. And it's really done like it's not like here's a fact, here's a fact. It's done from this very humanistic style, like telling their myths while if their music has been recorded, like recordings of their music were playing in the background, and you get it be like, imagine you're one of the last families living in the now ruined city of Angkor Wat. You can hear the monkeys chattering in the trees down the street that used to be the main temple. And it's just like, it like pulls you right in and as a narrative experience and someone thinking about that for wanting to tell it in stories. It's just so, so great.
Fantastic. Um, I'm gonna make this one. I think this might be my last one, although there's plenty more on this list. Uh, but for sake of time, I'm gonna say the my next pick is the Planescape Monstrous Compendium. It's a
Wait a minute, that's a gaming product.
yeah, that's a monster book. It's like an appendix monsters compendium for the original Planescape release back in the day when it was still TSR. And if I'm not mistaken, the entire book is drawn by Tony DiTerlizzi.
Oh yeah.
And this thing should be an art book. Like that is like I couldn't tell you about one single creature in the actual book, but I can tell you all about like these massive art pieces that are going over, multi pages, and like the level of detail and how whimsical and creative and fairy tale esque all these creatures look, and the amount of detail that goes into, monsters that we kind of take for granted today, I'm sure. Uh, this book, I've looked it up. Its physical copies run $200 used,
Dear
which makes
God.
me completely regret, the one that I had. I think I either lent to, I don't remember exactly what happened, but I think I lent it to somebody. Hey, you, whoever you are, if you hear my voice on this podcast, return my fucking Planescape book, please. But you can still look at a lot of the art online. And it goes without saying that like fantasy art is so fucking cool. We raved about the fantasy art the for playing Gia, for instance.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
so if you have access to a book, even if it's a gaming book that's an art book, just going through it and going through page after page, just looking for inspiration, I find that is a very very good and effective tool to get kind of the juices flowing for your game.
Oh man, that just got me my last one to talk about.
All right, go for it.
And this is really specific. The Art of Magic the Gathering Ixalan book.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So Ixalan was the set of Magic the Gathering cards that I think first came out 5 or 6 years ago. And it has this universe where there's like a Mesoamerican civilization and a like conquistador-esque civilization meeting, except the Mesoamerican civilization has like dinosaurs and shit. Um, and then there's also like merfolk around, and then there's a whole pirate faction, and the conquistadors are all like vampire paladins.
Okay.
So it's wild, and the art for this is everything that you would think of when I'm talking about that.
Right,
Like,
right.
and so there was a little adventure called like a little thing they published, I think in a Dragon magazine or just as a PDF called like Plane Shift Ixalan. Here's how you could run a game in the world of
Oh
5e in the
wow.
world of Ixalan. And I was like, I want to take this further. And then my buddy Corey bought me this art book.
Oh nice.
And I was just and flipping through it like the looking at the fantasy art, like just a giant coffee table book with full page spreads of the paintings that make Magic cards. If
Mm-hmm.
you need a source for
Oh,
ideas
yes.
for your game, just pick up one of those
Right.
in the flavor that you most like. And I'm pretty sure most of those wind up on the clearance shelf at Barnes and Noble. So you can probably find them online pretty cheap.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That's amazing. Now I kind of want to play in that game
It's
in that world.
sick.
Yeah. All right. Well, listener, if you have any sources of inspiration that you want to add to the list, or if you have questions about anything we've mentioned in this episode or any other episode of the Jaunty Mantis, you can get in touch with us at jauntymantis@gmail.com. You can also
Yeah,
go bother Jesse
if we
on
missed
social
some
media.
low-hanging fruit, like, yeah, tell us. We'd love to hear what you like.
Yes, definitely. Jesse, where can people bother you on social media?
Well, do not seek me on social media,
Oh,
but I
okay.
am at JingoistFet on Twitter, and we are at Wanty Mantis on Twitter as well.
Excellent. Excellent. And until next time, listener, get out there, get inspired, and play some fucking role-playing games or some shit.
Yeah, play some fucking games or don't. I mean, I'm not your supervisor. Like, you can do what you want. It's a free country.
Get back to work.